Okay, we're going to start this the next session, and yeah, you guys can all be in the front, and then we'll move.
I can move this.
Yeah.
Backwards everywhere.
Okay, we're going to start on time, and this is the session that is essentially storytelling through film. And let me know if you can hear me, because we've got an airplane and we've got music and we're good. Okay, good. So my name is Mary Ann Beyster, and I am the moderator for this session. I'm on the Directors Council for Scripps Oceanography and then active in Blue Technology Innovation. I'm also a public media, hold that thought, a public media film producer. Let's just see if there's three. Okay, so I'm personally focused on documentary films that are character-based and focus on entrepreneurship, community health, and wealth building and sustainability. But I recently have gotten more interested in marine conservation, so I'm active with two marine conservation feature films that are highlighting community stewards, and then also doing a pilot in 360, Underwater 360. So over the past 2 years, I've had the pleasure of meeting researchers, artists, and entrepreneurs that are focused on seaweed conservation and restoration, as well as cultivation. And my excitement in this field led to me researching what films exist. And so I've watched many films, and I've cataloged about 60 films that have been made in the last 10 years. Mostly are free and available. And there's always more to see. And I'm really excited about being here today and that the festival asked me to participate, and along with introducing me to new works and some new filmmakers that I hadn't met. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to screen 3 short films and a trailer. And collectively they take us through the local waters, and also we're going to go around the world. And they're going to offer whimsical and serious and really awe-inspiring moments. All of these films were made and released in the last 2 years. And one of them, Dark Beautiful Places, is actually premiering with us today. So let's give them a round for the premiere. Yay! So before we start with the screening, I also wanted to call attention to the film that's been looping, and that film is called 35 Miles. That is a film that is produced by Howard Hall Productions. That is a San Diego-based team of Howard and Michelle Hall. They are award-winning. They're an award-winning team, Emmy award-winning, motion picture award-winning. They have releases on broadcast television, some of which have kelp habitat, and as well as IMAX. And so recently, they showed 35 Miles at the San Diego Underwater Film Festival, and they were gracious in allowing us to have access to this film and have it looped. So I'd like us to acknowledge 35 Miles and Howard and Michelle Hall as well. Okay, so with the sun, we've tried our best to give you a screen so we can screen, again, these 3 films and a trailer. This will be about 20 minutes. And most importantly, we have a panelist of the filmmakers and film subjects, and so we'll spend a majority of our time also talking with them. I'll also remind you, these are free and available, so we'll have information on how you watch them in the future. So with that, I think we can roll the films.
Diving on a healthy rocky reef is a little bit like flying through a healthy forest on land, except there's fish everywhere. There's a tremendous amount of color. The ground is mountainous. There's just life everywhere. It's something to experience rather than just see. We'd have a lot more rocky reefs in Palos Verdes if it wasn't for some historic landslides. Palos Verdes has a rich history of landslides. Portuguese Bend, the Abalone Cove landslide that was started in the 70s. 1999, there was the Ocean Trails landslide where the golf course was being built and the 18th hole fell in the water. And there was another one in 2011 at White's Point. They put a tremendous amount of terrestrial sediment into the ocean. We have a pretty good idea of what that does to a reef. It's dramatic in the data. It goes from a functional reef with algae and fish and lobster to slop, just mud, and makes it so there's no way anything can settle on it and grow. It's really bad.
Rocky reef habitat has a variety of very important economic values. In Southern California, there really is less rocky reef than in Northern and Central California. So when we lose a section of reef, as we did on Palos Verdes, it's a much more serious loss.
I've been fishing in Southern California for over 30 years. There are literally tens of thousands of people that participate in sport fishing in the ocean in Southern California. Habitat is the major determinant of that. Unless you have good habitat, you're not going to have good fish populations. No fish populations, no fishermen.
Our project is an attempt to turn the clock back on that. Our goal is to recreate rocky reef habitat that can't be buried. And by doing that, we create a sustainable rocky reef habitat that will support kelp production and fish diversity and abundance long into the future.
The first step for this project was doing dive surveys, and we have essentially surveyed nearly every single reef in Southern California. We've done that multiple times, generating an enormous amount of data. What kind of fishes are there, how many, and how big they are. And then we would also do surveys at the same time on invertebrates, algae, kelp, and measurements of the physical habitat. And so we have utilized that science to determine what kind of reefs at Palos Verdes are the most suited and most productive for this type of project.
Once we determined what makes a good reef, we were able to design something that would look like what we defined as a good reef.
When we first saw rocks fall in the ocean, it really was extremely gratifying to see the project come to fruition. It really was a culmination of over a decade of work by our entire team, and the benefits of the reef will last for decades.
We came back and it was just covered in fish. It's something where you've drawn it and you've put it on maps and you designed it yourself, and you're still sitting there thinking, this is immense.
The primary goal of restoring this reef was to enhance fish production. We wanted to see a large number of fish and a growing number of fish each year. We wanted to see that the reef was actually producing life rather than just attracting it from somewhere else. And very early on, we were getting good indication that that is exactly what's happening. But we weren't expecting to see a whole lot attached to the rocks in a short period of time. And that's, I think, the most surprising thing so far, is that life attached itself to these rocks very, very quickly. They are full-fledged kelp forests within 18 months of it being built. These reefs have blown past my expectations. The level that it's at right now, as of a year and a half into its existence, is something I didn't expect to see for, honestly, 8 to 10 years.
This is the first true restoration project of its kind in California, where you're actually replacing reefs that were lost with the same material that the reefs were made from on the open coast.
Really, this is designed to be beneficial to everyone. Scuba divers, underrepresented fishers in the community, and commercial harvesters. We really hope this will be the best restoration work that's ever been done with a rocky reef.
I'm Oriana Poindexter. I'm a marine scientist and an artist, and I'm based here in San Diego, California. Come along with me and I'm going to teach you how to make cyanotypes today. Cyanotypes, are also known as blueprints, are one of the earliest photographic processes, and they're really simple to make. They only require 2 chemicals, as opposed to the many chemicals that are involved in black and white film and color film photography that we know today. And to develop and process your prints, all you need is the sun and water. And so they're really simple and easy to make no matter where you live. Here in San Diego, I can go free dive for fresh kelp, get inspired by watching it move in the ocean, and then get out and create a piece of art with that physical connection to the movement of the sea. We finally got to dive again today after having to surf for a whole month. So. The cyanotypes that I make are contact prints, or photograms, which are one-to-one reproductions of objects laid directly onto the paper. I like to use kelp, but sometimes I've experimented with other types of algae, with rocks, shells, other things I find on the beach. You can use anything, really. The cyanotype process requires an emulsion of 2 different chemicals, iron salt and potassium ferrocyanide. You mix the 2, then paint onto your surface. I use watercolor paper mostly, and let it dry. You want to do this in a dark space. It doesn't have to be pitch black like a traditional darkroom, just no direct sunlight. I usually paint my sheets in the garage at night. The emulsion will dry down to a yellowish color, and once it's totally dry, you're ready to use it. You put your object on the paper, lay it in direct sunlight, and expose it for about 6 to 10 minutes here with the bright sun that we have. I've made cyanotypes down in Antarctica where I've had to expose for up to 15 or 18 minutes. So it just depends on the intensity of the sunlight that you're dealing with. So after you've exposed your print in the sun, you begin the development process by washing it in water. It can be either fresh water or salt water. You rinse it until all the yellow color is gone and the whites shine through bright white instead of yellow. Then you just take it out, lay it to dry in the shade. And that color, that kind of typical blue color, will deepen overnight as it dries. I wanted to start making cyanotypes actually because I have this dream of making really gigantic cyanotypes that are like as big as the kelp forest. It's actually a really cool history of women, science, cyanotypes, algae, and art. Beginning with Anna Atkins, who was one of the early practitioners of the medium back in the 1850s, when women weren't exactly encouraged to pursue scientific careers. She was a British botanist, and she would go down to the coast and collect algae, make pressings, and then from there make cyanotypes. I like to think that the thread of that history pulls through to this place. Ellen Browning Scripps, the woman responsible for most of La Jolla and the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, was known to walk these beaches and collect algae and make pressings at home with them, along with her sister. I learned to make algae pressings from Jen Smith, a professor at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, when I was a student there. And that actually has planted the seed and got me dreaming about making cyanotypes with fresh kelp. So with my work, I really just want to inspire people to feel more awe and wonder for the ocean and the things inside. I like to photograph and make cyanotypes of the kelp forest because it's a way to translate that awe and wonder that I feel when I'm in those environments onto paper for other people to enjoy if they can't get out there themselves.
Países de todo el mundo tienen que comprometerse a proteger los bosques de algas, a cuidarlos.
Natural kelp forest can fix approximately 3,000 tons of carbon per square kilometer per year.
We have big pools and we pump in carbon dioxide from the Southern Hemisphere's largest distillery, so a really sustainable way to get food and importantly really nutritious food.
And so once a population that is comprised of unique endemic genetic lineages disappears, there is no way of recovering it because you can have lineages that become extinct.
Si perdemos estos lugares, perdemos también entonces muchas especies costeras y muchas especies pelágicas.
Less than 1% feed supplement can eliminate more than 90% of the enteric methane emissions of ruminant livestock.
Imagine if 70 k's of forests of eucalyptus on land disappeared from Sydney, people would notice and would raise their arms and tell the government to fix this. The same thing happened but underwater and no one even knew about it.
What's it like to be in a kelp forest? It's so dreamy in a kelp forest. It's like golden hour in the evening in the forest when it's summer and sunny and there's like fireflies and like the dust particles in the sky and like the sun rays but it's like all the time like that there. It's like being in a magical space, but it's quiet because your ears are covered in a hood and all you can hear is your own breathing. So it's meditative too. It's dreamy. My name is Jasmine Novak and I am an artist from Seattle. I started diving in my basically backyard, like 15 minutes from where I grew up. Some of my earliest memories are at the beach in Mukilteo near the ferry and the lighthouse clam digging with my mom. The ocean was always a part of my life, but I didn't relate to it in the same way I relate to it now. I just thought it was like gray and sad and like cold. But now I realize how beautiful it is. When I first started diving, I was in so much awe of what was underwater. So I went and bought this little crappy point-and-shoot camera with a little crappy housing, and I thought I was going to get the best photos. And now I look back and I'm like, wow, these are terrible. But I always wanted to document what was down there because I knew that a lot of people didn't know what it looked like. Like my mom would be like, what is, isn't it scary? Like what's down there? I'm like, everything is down there. I had this overwhelming feeling of awe and magic, and I wanted to feel that outside of that space. And I wanted other people to feel that because a lot of people don't know it's there or have access to it. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what it was about those spaces that gave me that feeling. And then I tried to take those photos back to my studio and turn them into paintings. I have tried watercolors and acrylics, but they don't have that depth and saturation and lusciousness that oils do, so I paint with oils. The painting I'm currently working on is it's a lot greener than the other ones. It's a lot more murky and dark and mysterious, which I think is more reflective of what it's actually like to dive here. I kind of want this painting to have an eeriness to it. Kind of like I actually wanted it to be kind of like melancholy. It's a lot different than what I normally paint. And I feel like I'm trying to ease people into relating to murky and dark places and spaces and feelings. I feel like that's why a lot of people can be afraid of the ocean, because it can kind of symbolize the darkness that we have. A lot of people are afraid of their emotions, and a lot of afraid of their darker emotions. And I think that the ocean can represent that sometimes. And so when I found out how beautiful the ocean was in the kelp forest, I started relating to it in a way that was less scared. And then it became beautiful, and that was kind of like a reflection of my journey into exploring my emotions and working through some of my mental health stuff. And I want people to see that our dark places are beautiful, and that our dark places can be like the ocean, and that place is beautiful too, and to connect with it in a way that's more positive. I hope that my paintings are an invitation to look beneath the surface and to find beauty in the darkness.
Okay, let's give them another round of applause for these beautiful films. And let me just check if Jonathan Williams is here. All right, Jonathan, great. Come on up. And so why don't you all take a seat? And while you do that, I'm just going to briefly mention the Blue Forest, because that was just a trailer that you saw. And that Blue Forest is made by Ocean Souls Films. They're in London, and the director is Philip Hamilton. It's a 35-minute film. You can see it on their website, and you can see it on Vimeo. And you could probably tell, but I just want to highlight that it's really celebrating kelp and seaweed from around the world. So you end up in that film seeing Portugal, kelp forests in Portugal, Chile, Australia, and coast of California. So again, I really encourage you to go to their website and watch the entire film. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our panelists and have a question, and then you can have questions, and I've got plenty queued up. But over on the farthest right, we have Jonathan Williams, and he is a research biologist and resident senior instructor at Vantuna Research Group at Occidental, and a film subject. So then we have Lindsay, and she is a molecular scientist and a filmmaker and the founder of Seagrass Productions. And we have Oriana Poindexter, who is a photographer, a marine scientist, and an artist. And Jenny Adler is a scientist, National Geographic explorer, underwater photographer. And then Jasmine Novak here is, as we learned in the film, is an artist based out of Seattle and the founder of Holdfast Studios. So I'm going to, since we're in a film screening, I'm going to ask you questions mostly related about film making or participating in the film. And so I think we need a mic, which is right over there. And we'll start with you, Jonathan. I'd like each of you to just quickly comment, why make a film? And for those that are in the film, how did you feel about participating in the film? Because that's a pretty big decision. So, Jonathan?
Okay, so why make a film? First and foremost, we had some obligations to state and federal agencies to make an outreach film to do this work. Let's be perfectly honest about that. But we also had a want and a need to get the information out to stakeholders, the local interests, anyone who is a part of the problem, anyone who's part of the solution. It was important to get that information out. And frankly, we had a little bit more negative feedback prior to the film than we would have liked. And the film actually turned that negative a long way around towards a positive. So it was really important to get that information out about exactly what was going on, what the results were, and the fact that this could be done, if nothing else. As far as actually being a participant, was a little bit shocked when the first cut came back and it was mostly me, because didn't really want that and still not terribly comfortable with it, but it was good to be able to at least talk about it and let people know that that we're there and doing this work.
Great, thanks. Let me just pass the mic.
So the film Oriana and I did was more of a collaboration. It was back in 2021, and Oriana had reached out, and she's like, hey, I'm looking for a film that'll showcase the process of my work. And I immediately was like, yes. Like, I wasn't working at the time, but I was like a chance to like fangirl and get in the water with Oriana. So I immediately said yes, and we got out in the water and shot and filmed, and I was just starting off. So I was like, had some issues with like my GoPro in the water and all that kind of stuff, but we had a lot of fun filming it, and I think it was cool to showcase, how much fun Oriana has doing her work and the inspiration, from her work through this film.
Yeah, it was really wonderful to work with Lindsay on this project, and I wanted a film to exist, but I didn't really think about how me being in the film was going to work out until we were actually doing it. So that part was a learning curve for me, and I still, that day that we filmed, it was like the whole day disappeared, and then it was like 6 p.m. and we were like, how did that day disappear? So, but I think that's kind of like the best possible scenario, to be so engrossed in what you're doing that the entire day disappears and you're sunburned and like the seagulls almost took your lunch, and then you have this really awesome product that came out of a lot of Lindsay's work after that cool day where I got to hang out with Lindsay. So yeah, and the fact that I'm able to share this sort of like complicated process behind my artwork through this film has been really helpful for me. Just in the outreach that I do and the kind of developing my work as well. So,
a lot of my work focuses on communicating science and conservation, and I think that can sometimes be complicated, right? It doesn't always have to be, and it shouldn't be, because you're telling a story. But I focused mostly on women who work underwater. Sort of like Oriana's process, a lot of it hinges on me being in the water, and that's how I'm the most creative, and bringing stories from underwater to the surface for people who don't want to jump into these dark, beautiful places. And I found Jasmine's work actually on Instagram, and just sent her a message and reached out and was like, your work is amazing, and I think that you're engaging people that we're not engaging through the scientific community. Can we come tell your story? And she was like, she lives in Seattle and happened to be in in Santa Cruz. And so we went tide pooling and hit it off and ate kelp burgers. And ended up, she had her first studio show, and we went up there and just started to film her and talk to her, and ended up really connecting. And I'm just so grateful that she was able to be open and vulnerable with her story, because I know it's not easy.
What was the question again? Why did you decide to? Oh, so the way
I have never decided to just like share my art publicly. It's like always been a very private thing for me. And then sometimes I would finish painting and I would post it. But having her reach out to me kind of made me realize that maybe I have a lot more to share with people. And then having my art show, it just kind of made sense to have a short film explaining the whole process, because a lot of it I do behind closed doors and it's a very private experience. So, yeah.
Go ahead. I have one more question. We'll start over here, and then I'll field some other questions. But these are all short form, which puts a lot of pressure on story. So I'm curious if you could comment on what were the key, maybe even the process, but more importantly, like, why did you choose what you chose to put in the film? And was there anything that you didn't put in that you'd like to share? Yeah.
I mean, so much of what we put in the film was decided by Mother Nature.
Yeah.
Because what we hoped for was clear, beautiful water with amazing kelp and lighting and colors and everything, but it ended up being kind of murky. But that is the point of my art, is that I want people to see that murky, cloudy, foggy conditions are still beautiful, even if it's not the clear crystal water that you'd like to see, like in the tropics. And so it kind of worked out, even though it's not what we wanted. But we wanted to film beautiful, murky, moody spaces, basically where I go to film and get my reference photos. So.
Yeah, we had such a good interview and good conversation on the beach that it was hard to cut it down. Poor Ian, my partner who edited the film, I think was just sitting there like, how long are they going to talk for? Because I just have a lot of questions, and her story was so interesting, and then I like made her cry, and then we were talking about that before. She's like, oh my God, I forgot that I cried during that interview. And then you have to decide, like, do I put that in because it's emotive and part of the story? But like, it wasn't. It was just, we were talking about the kelp. But one other thing that I'm pretty cognizant about is like featuring women from all different backgrounds too. So one of the other women here, I don't know if she's here now, is Kalani Ortiz, who's in a series of 5 films that we're working on about women in kelp. And she is from Mexico, so she did half of the interview in Spanish. And Jasmine and I asked her a bunch of questions about how her mom being from the Philippines and her being half Filipina is like influenced her relationship with the ocean, and it was something that we kind of explored a lot in the interview, but then there wasn't like a whole ton of space to talk about it in the film. And so I don't know, if it was longer we could, but this part felt like kind of a succinct enough story that it could be powerful for people to watch in 5 minutes.
I know there was a lot that I wanted to talk about in the film that Lindsay and I made together, and I think that we got most of it. Because there was that whole like history aspect that I wanted to include, because that was really part of what drew me to this process in the first place. But yeah, I think Lindsay did a fantastic job fitting it all in under 5 minutes.
And you did a fantastic job starring. But like I think Jasmine said too, I think the thing I wish I included more was more underwater footage, but we didn't have, I think, the most ideal conditions. And I'm not a free diver, so I was just kind of snorkeling while she was free diving down, and I would kind of guess where she'd pop up, like after a few minutes. But I probably should have been on like scuba, maybe getting footage, and like Oriana said, we did this in the day. But I think I wish I would have included some more drone shots too, because those were a lot of fun. So we got to go out and get some more of those, by the way.
There seems to be a pattern here of not great conditions. It took us a couple weeks to actually get good enough conditions to get good visuals. So then what I'll say about the actual production and the choices that were made is that we put a lot of faith in our filmmaker, Sean Wolf. We put a lot of faith in him into telling our story. We wanted to get the point across that we did a thing, the thing is working, and we think it'll continue to work. Tell our story for us, because we're big dumb biologists. We don't do the film part of it for the most part, and he did a great job of it. In fact, when he sent us the first cut, it was an absolute shock to our systems of how good it looked, especially because the conditions were pretty bad. It was murky, and so yeah, he did the work for us, and we put our faith in him, and he rewarded us for it.
Yeah. Are there any questions people have? No? Okay, good. I have some more questions then. Oh, yes, where? Yes, please. So I didn't hear the question. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, the music's so loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Apart from doing the activity that you do and that you showcased in your clips and your movies, do you think that like making the movie make you discover another, I don't know, another part of your work, or did you like, I don't know, explore another part of your what you were doing in the beginning and that you really loved? I think that showing it then and filming it opens another door. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that question. Also, because Jonathan, the way you opened up was you didn't really have a film in mind, so be curious how that might have changed.
Okay, well that's an easy one. We didn't have anything in mind. We had the story we wanted to tell, and what Sean, our filmmaker, did for us was provide everything to narrative, to story, to video, and to your question, we've actually had him do films for other projects for us. Now we're continuing that. We're getting such good feedback on it that it's really hard to not do it if we can piece together funds to pay him what he deserves to do it.
I think for me it was cool because I ended up finding a friend and someone who I'm like still friends with, and met Oriana, and like now they're gonna work together, and like I don't know, it's cool to like just develop the connections, because they are people, like we're all here for a reason, like we're all here because we're Kelp people, but it's not all like, not everyone in San Diego's here, you know. So it's fun to meet other people in the community that like no matter where they're from, you're gonna like keep probably working together and doing other projects. No, she
said. Is there another question? Because let me just ask you, what's next? What are you guys thinking? What projects do you have next that are film related? And what would the audience be? And how are you thinking about impact? Like, what's the impact that you want?
I mean, I know that I will make a film someday. It's not my next project. I have an art show coming up, so I'm focusing on that. But I think that when I make my film, it'll be similar to the topic, not so much about me, but about relating to the darker parts of the world and the ocean and ourselves, and finding beauty in it, I think. But that's kind of all I've thought about so far. And then relating my art and underwater to that too.
I'm looking at kelp forests globally. I had a fellowship for the past year to look at like conservation, restoration, and management in kelp forests on all the continents. So I ended up in like Antarctica and the Falklands and South Georgia and Argentina and anyways, like all over, in Japan. And then I ended up meeting Adam, who's in the back, like hiding, who's working on a film about called Seaforestation. And we realized that we were like kind of independently working on almost the same film. And so we ended up meeting on a boat in Baja, and that we got chased by Hurricane Hillary, working with some scientists from Hopkins. And now we're working on a film together that's sort of like a global look at kelp and how we can help save it all over the world.
My next projects, I don't know that will be film related, but they're kelp related. And actually, have a couple exhibits coming up in early January where I'm going to be able to showcase my artwork alongside other artists working with seaweeds, and as well as historical specimens. So bringing in seaweed pressings like the ones shown, actually exactly the ones shown in the film that you saw, and some that actually predate that. So we've got like observation and documentation of seaweeds in La Jolla from 1890 to the present. That'll be on display at the UCSD Geisel Library in January. So that's exciting to be able to kind of take what I was talking about in that film 2 or 3 years ago and like be able to make it accessible to people in real life. So.
I'm working on some short films with the fishermen here in San Diego, actually. I've grown quite fond of them and building a relationship with them. And so I would like to highlight different things they're working on or different issues that they face. So I'm working on that. But I am going to make a shameless plug, too, for something I am a part of. So if you guys like films, I'm also affiliated with the San Diego Environmental Film Festival. So that's kind of another project I'm working on. We're heading into our second season, and we're having our festival on November 17th and 18th. So if you guys have any questions, come find me after this. So I have some business cards. So it's really fun.
I have no filmmaking aspirations whatsoever, to be honest with you.
That always can change.
Well, so here's the thing: is that film that you saw, the first film, was it was actually an update to the original film. So we did the first film about 6 months after we installed the reef, and then the second one, the update for it was 18 months after, and we're hoping to keep kind of doing that because things are changing, as you might expect. So that's my filmmaking aspiration, to keep building on it and see where it goes.
Mm-hmm. I'd like, let me just check. Any questions? Okay. Oh, yes, please. You use the mic. Thanks.
Yeah, I noticed like with these films being about seaweed, a lot of it's in and around the ocean. And I was wondering if there are any sort of specific production challenges related to being like underwater specifically that were unexpected. I know weather was mentioned. And then likewise for those of you who were behind the camera rather than in front of the camera, were there any challenges introduced to your work created by like having a camera there or having to produce a film at the same time as doing your work?
Well, I'll keep it brief because we've already mentioned it, but visibility can be terrible, and that's not great for a visual medium, right? Especially where we were particularly doing this project. It's subject to landslides, which just puts a bunch of sediment and turbidity in the water. So we had to pick a good day out of several weeks. That's our main issue. It's just, if you can't see it, it's not a good video. That's for sure.
I think we had mentioned it too, but the ocean's unpredictable. And I know when we went out, it was after all these storms, and we were out there and we couldn't find the kelp. And like the kelp is one of the stars of our film, right? And so we were out there looking for kelp, and we're picking up scraps, and I'm just having Oriana like hold it up, like just pretend you found this amazing piece of kelp that has all these holes in it, Yeah, and finally we found it, but that was one of the challenges. And then at the time too, I was shooting on my GoPro, and it was so cold, my GoPro kept freezing. So I remember I'd have to like stick my hands out of the water, blow my hands, like take the battery out, put the battery back in. Yeah, it was very amateur stuff, guys. I mean, but it was a lot of fun. We still had fun and we learned a lot.
Yeah, the kelp was there. It was just sleeping. It was hiding. The current was strong, so it was like brrr on the bottom instead of standing up straight. The medium that I use is a photographic medium, and it's sensitive to UV light. So in real life, when I'm really doing prints that I care about, I'm like in the dark setting them up. And so that's not a great look for a video, like me in the garage in the dark. So we sort of staged it outside, and I set up some prints, and then I was like really embarrassed by how they turned out because like I did them wrong by setting them up in the sunlight where you could see it for the video. So, but we got the point across, I think. Yeah.
Everything's hard when you're filming underwater. It's like impossible. Like the camera's not waterproof. You can't breathe. You can't see. It's dark. Like the tide is wrong. You drove like 4 hours out into the middle of nowhere, and then like, yeah, it's like everything's heavy. But it's awesome. It's part of the challenge, right? I mean, and it's what makes it, I think, so much more appealing to people because not everyone jumps in the kelp forest. I'm sure like a lot of you do, but a lot of people don't. And so getting out there and getting that, like, and you mess up. Like, you get out there and you're like, oh my God, I had bubbles on my dome that I didn't wipe off. Like, my camera battery died and now I have to get out and change it, but I don't want to get my camera wet because it's not waterproof in there. But it's cool. That's what makes the best videos. And so it's a fun challenge. And your hands freeze. And yeah, it's fun. Yeah, that's why we keep going back, I guess.
So when she was filming me, I kind of just decided I wasn't gonna get any good footage, and I'm like, I'm pretending right now, and it's beautiful, but I'm pretending. But I also was still filming, and then I went back and looked through it all, and I actually got some really decent, good footage, and actually created a painting that's hanging in the Seattle Art Museum gallery that just sold, and so I actually got something good out of it besides a cool movie. So.
I'll make a comment with producer's hat on that. So I think it's really hard if you haven't done a nature or wildlife film to transition into that from documentary filmmaking. And I learned that, and Oriana was on a journey with me this last year on that. So the budget's higher. You have to, if you have a boat, you have to plan for the boat to get access, and then that may be multiple days. So scheduling's more challenging. You are chasing kelp, so like where the location is, because I was fighting for one location, got a lot of pushback. And then there's all the fun things like access, permits, and insurance if you're underwater, if you're on drones, and you just got to do it the right way. If you want to have this out, you got to get all those permits, all the insurance, and not fool around with that stuff. So the level of complexity was, it was an eye-opener for me. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I had a question and it went right on my brain. But another one came in my mind. And so from your films and some of the films that I've seen, there's a couple things missing, or perhaps there's challenges, and I'd like you to either pick one or the other or both. It doesn't really matter. One is you're telling the story at a particular period of time, but giving context and visually how to show that baseline change of what something was before, maybe even decades before, and how we can use storytelling to provide that context. Things are urgent, but they've also occurred before. So I'd like your comment on, in the future, do you see context in films going to be more and more important to help people understand that baseline of the ecosystem? And then the second part of that, you could answer both, but I'm kind of amazed that the lack of character-driven storytelling in this space. And there are a lot of characters in seaweed and kelp, and many motivations and journeys along that way. There's challenges, there's barriers, and oftentimes what we see are people talking about their jobs, and we see the lower third, and you really want to know a little bit more about them. And I'm wondering how you see potentially having more stories that are character-driven, along with science and information. So any comment on, these are my observations. You might have other observations about what's needed in the future as well. You can wing it.
I feel like she's doing a really good job at addressing the people in kelp, because a lot of the time it's just like, here's the facts and information and science, and then it's hard for people to connect to it if they see the same thing over and over. And I'm a big environmentalist and I care a lot, but I actually stopped watching environmental documentaries because it's very repetitive and it's actually like makes me feel really bad, and I don't want to feel bad. And so I feel like connecting with people and their stories and what Jenny's doing actually might be something that people can relate to better. Because
it's one reason, Jenny, your film is standing out. So you maybe even comment about, what's motivating you to do that, and are you finding any pushback to be character-driven?
I don't know. Jasmine and I were talking about this. Like, I like people, but I don't like being around people all the time. But I like telling people stories, and it's usually just people that I find interesting. And it was actually, now that you mention it, it was a really cognizant decision to not use lower thirds and not have it. We used like a little bit of her headshot interview, but I just got like overwhelmed, like you did, of watching all of these like headshot pieces, and I found myself wondering, even like, like you were in the video, and I'm like, oh, what does he do? What is his story? What's his background?
Exactly.
Like, I want to know about you now.
We want to know more about you.
Yeah, I don't want to know just like your sound bite. Yeah, but that being said, I mean, I do think there's a place and a time for those types of documentaries to get that like information out. But the character-driven storytelling, I mean, this is coming from a place of like wanting to inspire kids to go into art and science and seeing women in those roles as role models. And kids are going to get like so bored seeing another lower thirds movie with. I mean, you kind of have to watch some of them, but I think it's more of like a quick storytelling piece to highlight people like doing amazing things.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see the rest of your video together.
She's in one of the other ones.
But it's not done yet because the visibility was so bad. But no, it's like particularly the part about that it's difficult to talk about. And I'm not looking forward to talking about that about myself. But that's what makes me really interested. And I also think that that's a way to counteract all of the doom and gloom that is out there, to tap into one person's experience, because then that's something that more and more people can relate to versus the facts and the figures that are not as inspiring as they could be.
I think with character-driven stories, they're definitely more inspiring because, you do, like they've all said, you have somebody that you can relate to, that you feel inspired by. I know just in generally with environmental storytelling, like the most compelling stories are about a person that's affected by climate change, a person that's, affected by some issue going on in the environment, because you can relate to that person, whereas maybe you can't relate to a plant that's, going through things that are happening to it. You have that human element that draws the emotion. So I know just with like my film work or just with the Environmental Film Festival, the most, I think, impactful films do kind of have these character developments where, you're transported to these places and you're hearing this person's backstory, you're hearing how something is taking place and, how they're, trying to solve it or how it's affecting them. And those stories are, I think, what gets buy-in from people too when they watch the films. So.
Might be a cop-out on my end here, but in particular for our film and our story, we almost feel like the reef itself is the character. And it's one of those things that we literally watched it grow ourselves. We're showing it as it's growing. And like I mentioned before, I'd love to keep showing it growing without boring people with just straight up data and figures. Nobody really wants to see that. They want to see the actual physical character. So that's kind of where I stand on that for our particular group.
Okay. Is there anything I haven't asked you and you want to use this time to tell us about the film or the project that you're working on?
I suppose I'll keep it brief.
Yeah. We'll do lightning round. So 30 seconds.
This is a reef that was built in 2020, as you saw. We are in our 4th full year of monitoring it. We're on the hook to monitor it for at least 2 more years by the rules of our permits and so on and so forth. We're probably looking at more like 40 years. And it's something I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing the results of over time. See how people are utilizing it. See how people are using it in research and in their actual livelihoods and so on and so forth. That's something I'm hoping to share as we continue on in something outside of just the boring reports that I'll write every May.
Great.
I don't think I have any updates, but I just want to say, I'm grateful to be on this panel and learning from all the panelists here, and excited to kind of, I guess, get to chat with you guys a little bit more about your work. And I don't know if you can dive the reef there, but that'd be really cool to see. Maybe we should do that sometime, Oriana. But yeah, so it was a pleasure meeting you guys.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so talked out today, but my booth is still over there, so you can come see me later. Thank you.
I'm just really grateful for the people that, like Jasmine, that share their stories with me, because it's not my story to share, and I usually try to come in with like some semblance of what the story is, but not have it like pre-written in my head, because it usually changes from what I come in thinking of. especially when you travel like far places, but even with anyone's like personal story. And I sent it to her, the poor thing, like 3 days ago, because it kind of turned into a passion project when a grant fell through. And she was like, oh God, do I look like that? Do I sound like that? Like we all, like, I hate being on camera, and then I like film people for a living. So I'm just grateful that people will share their stories, and for Jasmine for her vulnerability. And like, she's the one that made the film powerful by sharing what she shared. And it's like her feedback on like whether or not she liked the film was honestly like the most important part to me.
What are we talking about now? I guess I'm surprised at how many kelp people are in the world. Because in Seattle, no one knows what kelp is. I'm like the kelp person up there, and so coming down here, it's like my people are here. It's exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm appreciative of being a part of it.
Well, it's been a pleasure to get to meet all of you, and I like the word saying, grateful. I'm grateful. All of you have scientific backgrounds, and all of you have embraced storytelling and been willing to get into the grueling efforts of creating a story and being in front of the camera or behind the camera. And I hope that more scientists learn how to communicate, science. And I know that's increasing in our educational systems, but get a camera in your hand and have fun and make mistakes, and ultimately you're honing your skills, whether you're in front of the camera or behind, and you are wonderful examples of that. So thank you for being here.